So at this point, you've all been hearing a lot about a few specific challenges with generative AI. Challenges such as how can we train or otherwise domain adapt a large language model so it can answer our customers' questions accurately. Another challenge that we hear a lot about is, are LLMs secure enough to process our customers' sensitive chats? But one aspect of generative AI that doesn't get enough airtime is the multilingual aspect. How can we domain adapt our large language models so they respond accurately not just in one language, but in the 5 or 20 languages that our company needs to support? And there's a common misconception out there that you only need to domain adapt your LLM for your company's base language. And you can use the LLM itself or even a traditional neural machine translation platform like Google to translate customer questions into your base language, and then of course translate the output back into the customer's language. The problem with this though is that just like an LLM can't accurately respond to questions about content that it was never trained on, neither can an LLM or traditional AI-powered translation platforms accurately translate content for a domain that it was never trained on. And this is the topic that Nicholas and I are going to be addressing today. I am going to be describing the recommended strategy to ensure that your multilingual use cases see the same level of success as your monolingual use cases. And Nicholas gets the more fun job of providing really interesting examples that illustrate the necessity of this multilingual domain adaptation. If you go to the next one, thanks. So before I dive straight into multilingual LLM-powered chatbots, I want to touch on some of the strategies to localize our more traditional chatbots as well, because a lot of us still have these in production. We'll begin with the rules-based or fixed-flow chatbots. These are the easiest to get up and running for your company, but they're also the least flexible, as we know, because we've all used them. Now, these are structured as basically dialogue trees, and the prompts are menus or dialogues, and the responses to the customer menu selections are basically static text, which is why they're relatively inflexible. When it comes to localizing the rules-based chatbot, you have two options. You can, well, in more sophisticated platforms, you can actually export your bot definitions. And this, because most of it's static text, this allows us to human translate the bot definition. And when we load it back into the platform, we basically spin up language-specific bots. This works, and we do a lot of it at Language.io. However, it's a little bit difficult to maintain because as each rule changes, as the text changes, you have to translate the changes as well. The other option is to use a real-time translation solution, but a platform like Language.io that is domain adapted. So you know it's going to accurately translate your company's specific content. So the way this works is you would just maintain your rules-based bot in one language. You're gonna translate the customer's incoming question into the language of your bot, say it's English, and the bot's going to respond, and we're going to translate the output into the customer's language. Now, this is where you have to use a domain-adapted translation platform that understands your context, right? So those are the two options for the fixed-flow bot. Now, if we go to the next slide, the more flexible solution, of course, is a traditional AI-powered bot. And we've used these as well. Traditional AI models have been trained to respond with much more flexibility to your customers. But even in traditional AI, they can only be flexible in the specific areas that your bot builder has provided intent data. Now, for anybody who's built a bot in Salesforce, you're familiar with this screen. This is where you're going to define intent data in Salesforce. In this example, our intent, which is basically the type of question that a customer might ask, is order status. And for each intent, we have to define lots of utterances or ways in which the customer might ask the question about order status. So to localize a conversational bot like this one, you have the same two options. We can export all of the intent data, human translate it, and then load it back into the platform and basically spin up language-specific bots. This is even more challenging to maintain because if you've ever worked with intents and chatbots, you know that you're constantly adding data, you're tweaking it to make them more efficient, adding utterances on a daily basis. And of course, all the changes you make in your base language model have to ripple across all of the language-specific bots that you've created. The other option also applies to a conversational model. We can just build a bot in one language. We can translate the incoming customer question into that language using a domain-adapted platform like Language.io, and then translate the output again back into the customer's language. Now, the be-all, end-all is, of course, the LLM-powered chatbot. These are much more flexible, as we know. It's why we all want to use them. Large language models are based on artificial neural networks that learn from a really large quantity of data without needing explicit programming. Now, with the general LLMs, such as ChatGPT and Bard and Llama, that large quantity of data that they learn from is the public internet. This makes them immensely flexible when it comes to responding to customer questions. But of course, there's a catch, right? The catch is that even an all-powerful LLM cannot accurately respond to questions about content it was never trained on, like I said before. And a lot of the questions that your customers are going to be asking your chatbot about might require access to your company's proprietary information that is not available on the public internet. It's gated, it requires authentication. So ChatGPT, Llama, Bard, they can answer general questions really well, but when we get into the weeds about your product, et cetera, they won't be able to do that well in one language, let alone across all the 5 or 20 languages that your company needs to support without training. And if you could switch to the next slide. Training AI is hard. According to Gartner, 81% of companies find the process of training a single language AI-powered bot far more difficult than they expected it to be. Then when they're faced with duplicating that work across all of the languages that they need to support, companies are abandoning the effort. Now, we're going to dig into how to make that training process automated and a lot easier across all of the languages. But first, let's hear from Niklas how Sky has scaled their multilingual customer support operations.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm the head of product management at Sky, and I'm responsible essentially for delivering our customer service platform globally into Sky's streaming propositions. So we're quite specifically focused on the streaming customer. And the way that we do this successfully and have a really sort of robust platform that we can be really proud of is by adhering to a set of principles when we do the product sort of management, creation, and deployment and maintenance. We essentially look at 3 key ones. So we have an approach where every journey or every experience that we look to deliver and support our business units with is really digital first. So digital is the core of what we do. We look for innovative technologies to support us in that. We also make sure that all of these journeys are efficient for the customer outcome. Not just for the customer, but actually also efficient for us to manage and sustain over time. So that's a really critical piece in the puzzle when we sort of bring products to market. In addition to that, the final one, which is also critical, is the commercial viability and sustainability. As we scale into different markets, we need to make sure that these technologies not just keep up with sort of how we ramp up customers, but is commercially sustainable for our businesses to use. And in the context of our customer, this is really important. Many of you will know probably, the type of streaming service customers that there are in the market. Not only is it a competitive landscape, but ultimately they share a lot of attributes that kind of make them high propensity to churn, and in some cases also kind of high risk of low customer lifetime value. And as a result, that's why this kind of commercial aspect to how we deploy products and how we maintain them is really critical. The way that we approached this initially was through a model of replication. So we would essentially build something that worked really well in our UK market, which is now, and we saw really, really positive kind of customer experience scores. We saw transactional NPS of 60 plus, we see CSAT scores more than 8, and we have first-time resolution of of above 70. So a model that we're very proud of. We then took this model and we replicated it into the expanding markets, so in Italy, Germany, and Austria. And we essentially provided a chatbot platform, a digital platform, and a customer contact center platform. And then we worked with the local business units for them to kind of operate these and work with us on making them really efficient. Now, as I said, we're seeing really positive scores across the board because we're replicating a successful model. However, when it came to scale this significantly, and we were looking at going in with a Sky Showtime proposition across Europe and launching in 22 markets in 18 languages, we knew that this model was not going to scale anymore. It was not going to be commercially viable, certainly, to do a localized setup with 22 contact centers. Even regionally, when we looked at 3, that was going to be really, really difficult to justify. So what we did is we chose strategic partnerships that could allow us to service customers in their local language the way that they need to, but on a single platform. So we chose to work with Language.io, we're here today, and really successfully integrate them into our real-time live translation, real-time live chat capabilities between customers and agents, essentially enabling a single contact center working in English to service all of these markets and the entire customer base. We also chose to partner with a chat platform that allowed us to be efficient in how we build a single bot in English, and using their translation capabilities built into the platform allows, again, to service the entire customer base very effectively and for us to work with them on managing these journeys in a simpler way. So that's been really effective, and the great thing is that we saw the same customer outcomes from a resolution perspective, CSAT, etc., kind of be transported onto this much wider proposition and deployment. Critically though, going back to the point about training, even without the use of LLMs, but using more of the AI and machine learning capabilities, we are really focused and invested in regular training of these models. We pay close attention to issues raised by customers, issues raised by agents, but also really maintaining and managing glossary terms and context within what we actually engage with customers on, because it's really critical. All of us are here today because we're excited about the next wave of capabilities in all of these spaces with conversational AI, LLMs, Gen AI, and we are too. We believe that this is absolutely part of our next phase of efficiency. We think that we can do more with this in the contact center and in our chatbots. But what we see is a really big risk as well. It would be relatively easy to infuse some of our chatbots with sort of generalist LLM capabilities, but without that domain-specific context that Heather was referencing and that I've just mentioned with regards to our propositions and everything, there's a real risk that we either misinform the customer or that we just don't respond accurately to the customer, and ultimately, actually also legal and compliance risks that we can introduce into this equation. And we're really, really mindful of how we manage this and set up the right guardrails and controls before we start to really go to market with some of these new capabilities.
Great. So if you could slip to the next one. As Nicholas has explained, there's a significant risk of miscommunication if you power your chatbot with an LLM that doesn't have your company-specific context. That's where you've got a little red area between just the intersection between chatbot and LLMs. The green area is the opportunity that we are taking advantage of at Language.io to add that missing context to the LLM so your chatbot can respond a lot more accurately. But to emphasize how crucial that missing context is, Nicholas is going to provide you with some funny examples of what happens when you use untrained AI to translate Sky-specific content or an untrained AI to answer Sky-specific questions. Back to Nicholas.
Yeah, and I think we're going to dive right in and just look at that general LLM example that I was talking about. The proposition name that we have for the Germany market is WOW. So the brand is WOW, and it's recognized within the industry. But when using and sort of testing and exploring these tools in a really controlled sort of environment, and we just ask a basic question of the ChatGPT and say, how do I cancel my WOW account? The model associates the WOW token more commonly with World of Warcraft. So not only are we not going to be answering our customer's question, but we're actually going to do a disservice to World of Warcraft, I guess, business owners, which isn't very nice. And me being me, I thought, okay, I can be really clever. I can obviously control this prompt. I can be the one who gives it the right context. So I can say, look, this is actually WoW TV. Go and give me the process for WoW TV. But unfortunately, that general LLM was not trained since January 2022. So there was no response for that domain-specific question. That's one example. The other example is more of an anecdote that we've come across in how we explore and sort of evaluate use cases, because we don't have a chatbot specifically live in Japan. However, when we were going through some of these journeys, we see that this English model of building some structured responses and actually having a quite good attitude to being a little bit cheeky with the customer, we could then have an English stock response that kind of said, when the customer prompts, I've forgotten my password, we say, oh, don't worry, I'd forget my head if it wasn't bolted on. Quite jovial, quite a nice experience if we can also get them to the right journey. But unfortunately, the way that the translation layer recognizes this, it kind of spits out a proper insult to the customer, and it's absolutely not the kind of experience that any customer should have to go through. So instead, it is telling the customer that they are stupid and that they've lost their head. So absolutely not what we want the translation capabilities to do. What we want it to do is obviously really recognize that the customer is having a problem, that within the framework of the service journey, they should respond with kind of the right outputs that we want the customer to see. And finally, this was a real sort of experience that we saw. Not too bad, but ultimately a customer is being thankful and trying to wish the agent a nice day, which is something that we obviously want the agents to feel appreciated. Unfortunately, because of some of the language input, they're saying thank you and wishing the agent, a nice rest at the bottom, which doesn't carry as much gratitude. What we want that to be is obviously accurately recognized with the appropriate sort of training of the models to kind of just say, look, thank you very much, have a nice rest of the day. So these are examples of where, if without the right controls in terms of training these models, again, you can really introduce risk into the process.
Thanks, Nicholas. So finally, we get to answer the big question, how can we domain adapt a large language model, not just in one language, but in all the languages that we need to support, so we don't wish folks a nice rest of the bottom? To answer this question, I need to talk a little bit about some of the services that Language.io provides, so this makes sense to you all. So in addition to providing a domain-adapted real-time translation platform that allows support agents to interact with customers in any language, we, for about a decade now, have been providing apps for all of the major CRMs that allow knowledge base administrators to automate the process of requesting translations and pushing knowledge base articles for translation into the Language.io platform. And we generally human translate knowledge base content because you want that to be perfectly translated. So if you have a robust knowledge base, and most of us do, because this saves us a lot of money if customers can answer their own questions, and for that to happen, it needs to be perfectly translated. But the knowledge base is where where we can find the answers to a lot of the questions that your customers will be asking of the chatbots. So what Language.io is doing is automating the process of training. It's going to be a combination, actually, of RAG and some fine-tuning and a few proprietary methods, but automating the process of taking that unstructured content and training our LLM with it, not just in the base language, but in all of the languages for which we are translating the knowledge base articles. So we can spin up truly domain-adapted, language-specific chatbots that are LLM-powered. And as we know, training goes stale really quickly. Another aspect of our solution is to allow these knowledge base administrators to also request translation updates. When you update a knowledge base article in your base language, that has to ripple out across all of the languages that you support. So when that hits our platform, our translation memory system recognizes what's new in that support content, so we can simultaneously update our domain adaptation process across all of the languages for which we are translating these articles. So in a nutshell, what this all means is that through this solution, you can use your LLM-powered chatbots to accurately allow customers to get their questions answered, not just in your base language, but in all of the languages that you support, whether that's 2 or 3 or 20. So lastly, for the foreseeable future, even the all-knowing LLM-powered multilingual chatbot won't be able to answer every question. And when the chatbot does need to kick the session over to a live human agent, that real-time translation platform that is domain adapted will continue to enable support agents to interact with customers in any language.
And I think this is exactly where we've seen a lot of success, is in the use of this kind of technology to, as I said, really be at the forefront of how we transform our contact center operation and make that really efficient and scalable. Today, we still work with 2 platforms for this solution, which means we have a contact center setup running on Language.io, and we have our conversational AI platform for chatbots. This performs really well, but with everything that's going on and with all of the challenges that Heather has kind of outlined, and the opportunity to really have a robust kind of training platform for controlling your content and the domain knowledge, and really putting guardrails around that, our vision for the future is really to say, wouldn't it be great if there is a single platform agnostic service that you can plug in and actually benefit for all the training and learning and the resource and investment you're putting behind, teams going in and tweaking and fine-tuning over time these models, but actually have that joined up so that your digital estate, your chatbot, and your contact center are all benefiting from these real-time learnings that you are, administering, and that essentially deliver value to all of your different touch points. So that's the future that we would like to see. And I think as a message, it's really for us to be the custodians of that kind of content, but we would definitely like to see that come about through the technology that everybody here is kind of interested in using.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.